Welcome. My name is Artifacts, and welcome back to the city of Atsuki. This is episode number 4, and we are returning back to the village that we made in episode number 1. Welcome. This is going to be a fun episode. Now, this episode took a little bit longer to make, and I'll get into that, why that is, later in this episode. We're going to start with a little bit of a chat, because I have some stuff to talk about. The new village, or the new name for the village that we started in episode number 1 is Sakatamachi, which stands for Alcohol Field Town. Now what this means is it basically means that back in the day, this used to be an area with a lot of rice fields. And as you know, rice can be used to make rice wine, or I think that's sake, right? I think if I'm correct. If I'm not, correct me in the comments, please. But that's what this area used to be. There used to be a lot of rice fields here, but now it's a lot more developed, and there's this little village here now. So maybe in the surrounding area I'll actually end up making some rice fields later in the series. I don't know yet. So for the stuff I want to talk about, there's a couple of things I want to address, and I've got some good news and I've got some bad news to bring. So I think we'll start with the bad news and have that out of the way, and then get into the fun stuff for this episode. Now, the bad news is quite bad, actually. It's not too bad, but it is going to be bad enough that some of you are really not gonna like it. And no matter what you're gonna say, I am going to do it. The thing I'm talking about is the station that I built in episode number 2. There is a big issue with the station, so big that I've decided to demolish the entire station in the next episode. Before I started detailing the station, I tested it out completely to make sure it worked, and everything worked. But in the process of detailing, something happened that is now creating a really big issue. The issue is that one of the platforms does not want to receive any trains, and the platform I'm talking about is the main platform of the station, the Shinkansen platform that is connected to the outside connections of the map. This means that no people are coming into the city using the Shinkansen. Now that is a big issue, and I wanted to fix it, so I tried, and I spent about 80 to 100 hours trying to fix this station, and I've tried everything. I have redone all of the train tracks, at this point about 2 or 3 times. I have redone all of the pedestrian paths. I have redone the platforms itself. I have redone the roads around the platforms, and nothing works. All of the platforms work. I can set up lines. I can even set up a line on the Shinkansen platform to the outside connection of the map, but no trains want to spawn. That's a big problem, and at this point I just don't want to spend any more time on the station. Now, since that episode, I also did a bunch of terraforming. I added a coastline, and I think a new station in a different shape is actually going to be really fun. So that's what we're gonna do soon. In the next episode, the station is going to be gone. The next episode is going to be the big terraforming episode, and I think that episode I'll demolish the station, we'll do some terraforming, and that's also when I can really start visualizing the layout of the new station. I have a good idea though, and I think it's going to be absolutely great. And I mean, right now we have a station that doesn't work, so it can't get any worse than that. And I'm sorry for doing this, but I just have to do it. So that was it for the bad news. Now for the good news. The good news is, well, this is not really good news, or it might not seem like good news, and one of the good news is that episode 4 took a little bit longer to make than I thought. You might think, is that good news? Well, actually it is. I discovered something new while I was working on episode 4, and as you guys know, I use Reshade to further change the graphics of the game to make it even more realistic as I can, and I found a new thing. I'm using the shaders by Marty McFly, which is known as Quint as well. He makes the Quint shaders for Reshade. And he is currently working on a new shader, which is currently available to patrons of his Patreon, which is adding retracing, or ray tracing, I should say, to Reshade. So I've been able to add ray tracing to City Skylines, and this makes the close-up cinematics so much better. So yes, the close-up cinematics look completely different now from the previous episode, and I hope you guys like it, because I spent a lot of time trying to find the best settings and just get the best looking lights and shadows in this game, and I think it makes a huge change, so yeah, I really like it. So, the next part of this episode, and this is actually the main part of the episode, is the Sakatamachi Elementary School. So, right now I'm just laying out the school itself. I just placed down the school building, and you can't really see what's happening right now, but don't worry, that what I just did is going to be removed later. So here I am actually putting in the schoolyard. I'm just using some ploppable pavement, just using that to kind of lay out the shape of the school itself. And you can see this elementary school is situated right beside the train tracks. So I looked at a whole bunch of elementary schools on Google Earth, and I found a bunch of elementary schools in Tokyo that were actually situated next to the train tracks. And there was one thing that I actually noted while I was working on this part of the school, and that was that there is a buffer between the elementary school and the train tracks most of the time, and that buffer is usually made with trees. So at some point you can see that I moved the school further away from the train tracks than it is right now. I'm really putting in a lot of detail into the school. I don't think I'll make every school as detailed as this one on the map, but while I was working on this episode, I just started putting in more and more detail, and it just looked so good. So yeah, I'm really happy with how this one turned out. Even though it was going to be an episode that I wanted to make quickly, I'm still happy I put this much detail in, because in the end it made a really big difference. So there have been a couple of mods that have been released recently that I forgot to talk about. Those are actually also part of the good news. Regarding making a new station, there have been a couple of assets I was actually waiting on. One of them was the platform shelters made by Ronix. So these are networks, and they're basically modeled after the roofs above the Tokyo station platforms. And he released them, so I wanted to add them to the station I built in episode 2. And I noticed that the platforms that I made were not wide enough for these shelters. These shelters are actually wider than the platforms that I made, and since they're networks, I cannot change their shape. So that's also a good reason to make a new station. I can use those shelters now, and then just be sure to make some wider platforms. Other good news is that since that episode, somebody released a bunch of prop Japanese platforms on the workshop. So just basically props that you can use to create Japanese-looking train platforms. Now, they are props, so they're not functional, so I'm gonna have to figure out how to use them and make them work as a functional train station. But I think if I just make a couple of small train stations first with those props, then I can kind of find out how to do it, and then I'll go back to making the main central station. So we're not actually gonna make a new station right away. I'm just gonna demolish it, and then we're gonna terraform the map in the next episode, and then later we will get back to making a main central station. Talking about new assets, there were these Japanese storage sheds that have been released. I forgot who it was. I'll try to put the name into the description or in the video itself. But they're absolutely awesome. So I had this little small plot of land when I moved the school further away from the rail. And I wanted to, add something in here, but I really didn't know what. And I thought, these sheds have been released. Why not just add like a little storage area? I figured that maybe the people living there have like some extra storage in this area. Maybe this is some storage for the school, I don't know. Even though it's not directly connected, but it might work. In the next part of this episode, this section is actually really fun. I had another small plot of land next to where these sheds are, And it was this really awkward area, and I thought, what am I gonna do with it? And then I thought, why don't I just add an abandoned house? Now, I know a lot about abandoned places, and I've visited a lot of abandoned places in Central Europe, and therefore I know quite well how they look, and it is a kind of atmosphere that I really like. So I definitely think of adding more abandoned stuff through this series. Now, in Japan, abandoned places, or at least the places that, or the people that explore abandoned places in Japan, often call these places haikyos. Now, haikyo is, I think it stands for ruins, so it's kind of similar, but it's not really an abandoned house, but that's usually the term that they'll use for like an abandoned place. It's a haikyo. So I decided, why not just add one? Because I had this weird, like, narrow shaped plot in between the road and the train tracks, and I thought, like, who's gonna live there? Like, you don't really want to have a house in this area. I imagine the noise is gonna be really bad. And I thought, if we imagine that a house used to be there, or it's still standing but it's just abandoned, I can imagine that a house that is located right here would be really tough to sell. You know, like, who wants to buy this plot of land to build a house on, because it's so noisy with being so close to the train. And I thought, yes, let's just make an abandoned house. I just found this one house that looked kind of oldish, had a bit of a rougher texture. It's just one of the Japanese houses, I think by Koma on the workshop. Forgive me if I'm wrong. There's so many asset creators I'm using assets off of at this point. And I am still planning on releasing a collection at some point, but bear with me, boys. A lot of you are asking about the collections, but it's gonna take a lot of time to organize everything. And to be honest, the questions, mod list, or can we have a mod list, or anything along those lines, that question is popping up so much in my comments, while in fact I don't even like the question. Like, every time that question gets asked, I get less, how do you say it? I get less urge to actually make the collection, if you get what I mean. Because, I mean, I've spent hours and hours browsing the workshop, finding things that would work for what I want to do. And it's just, I don't really see the point that much in having like an asset collection. Okay, I can kind of understand, like, if it's for a specific theme, and that's also what I definitely plan on doing. But a mods list, I don't see the point in it. You know, having the mod list is not going to help you that much, because I use over 110 mods, and all of these mods have individual settings, individual parameters that you can tweak. So even if you had the mod list of all the mods that I use, your game would still not look anything close to what my game looks like, because you don't have the settings. And therefore, I just don't see the point in it, you know? I just started playing this game a couple of years ago, and I learned along the way, and I just grabbed mods that I thought would be helpful for what I want to achieve. And that's how I got to where I am today. It's not that I got a mod collection from somebody else and just subscribed to everything and just called it a day. I actually put in a lot of work to get to this point where I am right now. And I don't see anybody who just comes with a question like mods list please, or mod list question mark, is going to be helped by having that collection. Now, about abandoned places, they have a really interesting atmosphere, and I really like conveying that atmosphere in this game. So right now you can see a really particular thing. I can get a little bit into detail. You saw that I put those construction fences there, and that is because right on that street where people walk, you probably would see fences to prevent people from going into this place. Because an abandoned place, it's going to attract people, and the local government probably doesn't want people wandering around there. That doesn't mean that an abandoned place is inaccessible though. Most abandoned places have a way in, and I can tell because I've done this probably about 200 to 250 times by now. I've spent about 3 years traveling around Central Europe visiting abandoned places, and I wished I still had the photographs, but the hard drive they were on has actually crashed a couple of years ago. Abandoned places usually have a way in, and most of the time it's on the back side of the property. If you want to get into some place, look on the back, or any place where it's by the side of the train tracks, or if there's like bushes or foresty areas around the building, look there. If there's a place that's out of sight, that's probably where you'll find a way in. Now, right here you can see I squished down a couple of Mr. Mason weeds with PO, and I'm doing that because right here I kind of want to make it look as if the weeds are sort of like pushed down by people walking over them. Because if there's a way in, you'll usually find some kind of a path where you can see on the ground, in the grass or in the foliage, that people have walked there before. And that is a good indication that that's a way in. Now, I like adding such tiny details because it really helps conveying a much more realistic scene. And because I've visited so many abandoned places ranging from small houses to huge mansions and castles to insanely big steel factories and everything in between, I know what these places look like up close. I've walked through a lot of these places, and it's the combination between nature taking over, just nature growing in places where it normally wouldn't grow, and natural decay combined with just years and years of just people visiting the place to just walk around and you know, just witnessing the place with their own eyes. It's that combination that gives a really interesting sort of like look to a place. And conveying this atmosphere of an abandoned place is, I think it's a really difficult thing to do in this game because this game wasn't made for that. And I can do it with a lot of mods, but still, like, I think if you've never visited abandoned places, it's going to be even harder to convey this in a game. I've visited such places, like I said, about 200 to 250 times, and the atmosphere you get is so different. You're all by yourself, and in a place you're technically not supposed to be. And you're just there, witnessing the scenery. And it's quiet, but there's still a lot of sounds. And it's usually just sounds like water dripping through a ceiling, birds, or even other animals. And then sounds in the distance of like humans just working, or I don't know, just anything basically, cars in the distance. But that feeling you get exploring places like that is just, it's a really interesting kind of thing. So yeah, I'm definitely thinking of adding more abandonment throughout the city. It's not going to be in every little area. The abandonment usually comes in specific areas of cities, but yeah, I'll get more in depth in that when we do another abandoned place. So, in this process of making the residential areas around the school, I also added some height differences. And one of the height differences here meant that we had a little bit of an area, and I could create like a road here that, you know, slopes downwards. But I thought, you know, it might actually be a lot more interesting to make a pedestrian walkway here with some, you know, just some stairs going down and some planters by the side. It wasn't initially a build that I wanted to include in the episode, but it turned out pretty alright, so I thought, let's just add it. I actually made the stairs with PO It's just a PO stairs from the workshop that, or just a stairs that you can convert into PO, and that allows you to put a texture on it. So I just found a texture of some nice old like tiles, old stones, and used that to kind of put it on some surfaces and on this stair asset. And that way I could actually make it look a little bit nicer. So I actually ended up replacing it later to so that I could, make the stones a little bit smaller in texture size. Right now, right here, you can see the result. It just looks a little bit better. And I also used a couple of different stair props to kind of just make a slightly more interesting looking stair like that. So it has a couple of like flat parts and then a couple of steps, and it looks really nice. So now we are getting into the detailing for the Sakatamachi Elementary School. Now, this is where I thought I was going to be done quick. I did the backside of the school with just like the couple of soccer fields, whatever it is, with the line markings. And I thought, oh, this is actually going to be pretty easy. This is going to be an easy build. But then I got to detailing the front of the schoolyard. And one thing I noticed by looking at schoolyards on Google Earth in Japan was that a lot of times these schoolyards are pretty well kept. There's a lot of like planters and garden areas and like all kinds of different trees, and it looks amazing just in general. Like they look so much more interesting than the schoolyards that I had when I went to school here in the Netherlands. Like our schoolyards are usually just a piece of concrete with maybe, or just some stones on the ground with maybe a little, I don't know, a playground thing, but even the playground thing is usually not that big. It's usually maybe one obstacle to play on, and maybe, how do you call those things? Like a little place with sand in it where children can play in? A sandbox? Yeah, I think that's what it's called. Anyways, Japanese schoolyards look a lot more interesting, so I actually ended up doing a lot more detail than I first thought I was gonna do. But like I said, it turned out so much better than I ever expected. I put a lot of these railings in, and I used PO to kind of paint them. I didn't have to do that. I actually found out later that there was actually a brown version of the same fence included in the pack, but I don't know, it works as well. I just used PO to make them brown, but I could have just as well used the brown version that actually came with the pack. So, good note for myself, if I ever need those fences again in a brown color, just take the brown version. There's another really nice mod that has been released. If you remember, I talked in a previous episode about those Tokyo guardrails that I use a lot of in the city. I'm actually not using them in this episode at all because we're not really on a main street or anything like that. But those guardrails are terrain conforming. So I complained that I couldn't convert them into PO, and that means we are going to use a lot of those and they're all going to count to the prop limit. Sway, the modder Sway, has released a mod that now converts all of your terrain conforming props into non-terrain conforming props, which means now I have non-terrain conforming versions of those guardrails. Meaning, I can now even convert those guardrails to PO. Sway, you're an absolute hero. Thanks a lot for that mod, because I actually talked about it in the previous episode, and I wish that such a mod was a thing, and then a couple of weeks later you come in with the actual mod. Like, how awesome is that? So thanks a lot. this is going to be the last section of this episode. Yes, this is already the last part of the episode. This is the final detailing. So this is just me going through the entire area that was built in this episode and just adding more and more detail. This is obviously, for me, I talked about this in previous episodes as well. This is the most fun part for me. I love building the actual stuff and laying everything out. But when I add these details, that's just when, like I said in previous episode, everything comes to life. And that's just so awesome. And actually, I noticed something in this part of the episode as well. I'm using the broken fences by, I think it was Ronix that made those. They're also terrain conforming, and I had a couple of moments during these episodes where I wished for non-conforming versions of those props. I can now make those with the new mod that Sway made, which is so good. So now I will even be able to change their shape, use them on elevated platforms, for instance. If I want to make an elevated part and want to use those broken fences because they look super realistic, I can now elevate them. I can raise them up because I can convert them into PO. That is such a game changer. It's honestly a thing that I wished for a long time, and there's more mods recently that have been released. Another good example would be the intersection marking tool. I wished for a mod like that for so long, and now it's here, and it's so good. I'm gonna be making use of it in one of the future episodes. I'm planning to do the terraforming episode in the next one. So the next episode will be nothing but terraforming and detailing parts of the map. I do need some of your help for that though. What are good trees that are low poly that I can use a lot of on the map without affecting my frame rate too much? If you have any specific trees that you like to use for like dense forests, let me know, because I need a lot of trees. Japan has a lot of low mountains, like the mountains in Japan are not that tall, and because of it, a lot of their mountains are like fully covered in forest. So I need to kind of find a way to make the forests on the map look really dense. And one way would be to add quite a few trees. Now I have the unlimited trees mod, but still adding 2 million trees is going to seriously tank the frame rate. I set up a texture with Theme Mixer that looks like a really dark green color. So I think if I would make a forest with some low poly trees that don't have too many tries, and then paint that texture underneath the forest, I can convey as if the forest is more dense than what it actually is. But I do need some good trees for it. So if you have some ideas, let me know in the comments. Now, I also have another idea for one of the future episodes, and that is, or maybe even all of the upcoming episodes, and that's to include a little Q&A section. So if you have any questions specific about me, about what I do, about the music in this series, about whatever I'm doing in this series, about an asset or a mod or anything, let me know. Ask me in the comments what your question is and add the hashtag Q&A. So hashtag Q&A, and I'll try and get back to some of your questions in the next episode. So yeah, this detailing part is just a lot of fun. I'm just adding these tiny little things. So here we have this really interesting road that just, it slopes downwards, and there's some like small houses along the road, only on one side, and then on the other side of the road there's this sort of like cliffside that goes down with a lot of trees and bushes and stuff like that. And I decided to add these Japanese guardrails on this road, and it looks really realistic. I just put some like of these rocks there as well, and then a little later you'll actually see me putting a ton of trees and bushes and foliage in this area as well. And it just adds a really cool shot. And even though this area is not really that developed, like I'm not using this part in the cinematics because there's nothing around it, but I feel like if this area is going to be fully developed, this is going to be such a nice road to drive down on, because it has that sort of like curvy road. It's like these, almost a hairpin kind of turn, and then it slopes down, and then you have these bushes with the height difference, and I think it's gonna look absolutely amazing. So that was it for this episode. Like I said, it was quite a long one to make, even though the episode itself didn't turn out that long. About 35 minutes, I think, is a nice length for these episodes. I did cut out a lot of the screen recording, though. I cut out a lot because there was a lot of repetition going on, and I want to keep these episodes entertaining to watch. So, yeah, let me know in the comments what you think of this new format of how I sectioned the video. I added these different sections with cinematics in between that kind of show quickly what was built in that section of the video. And I think it turned out great. I think this is even more watchable than the previous episodes were. So yeah, I'm always looking for ways of improving these episodes. And if you have any ideas of what I should be doing or what you think would be cool and something that I could do, then let me know in the comments. Same thing goes for if you have any idea for something I should be taking inspiration from in one of the future episodes. I'm always open for having inspiration, so if you know some place in Japan that you think would be absolutely cool for a build, then let me know, and leave me some Google Earth link or Google Maps link in the comments, and I'll approve your comment even if it has a link. So I actually keep a list on Google Maps where I have a map with all kinds of different points on the map of things that I think could be cool for a future episode. So I have a whole, basically a database of resources that I can look at. And same thing goes for I also keep a playlist on my YouTube channel that's a private playlist with all kinds of videos of places in Japan that I could think would be really nice. So some people sometimes ask me, how can you build something so detailed with a theme of a place you've never been to? And I can give you some tips. And I have, like I said, I have a private collection on my YouTube channel that I basically maintain just for me, myself. And that's a collection with just videos for inspiration. What I do a lot is I'll go onto YouTube and search for 4K videos of people just walking around. So that is absolutely great because you'll be able to see everything really up close in much greater detail than what you can with, for instance, Street View on Google Maps. And just by viewing these videos, and there's a ton of them on YouTube about Japan. There's a whole bunch of channels of people just walking around in Japan and just making videos of that. And those are, at least for me, my biggest source of inspiration for these episodes. So that was it for this episode. I had a lot of fun making this one. If you like this episode, then please subscribe to this channel because I'll be doing more episodes in this series. So subscribe and click the bell notification icon to stay up to date. I'll be back again soon with another episode. The next one will be the big terraforming episode. Like I said, let me know in the comments what you think I should be doing with the map, how you want it to look. And yeah, like I said, I'll see you again soon. Peace.